Hey everybody, my name's Aaron. I'd like to welcome you to my channel, Positive by Negative, where we're taking that dark spiritual coal and alchemizing it into shiny, bright diamonds that we can use for our personal growth and development in this big old crazy world of ours. And if you're new to my channel, welcome. It's great to see you here. And if you're coming back, welcome. It's great to see you here too. And, if you resonate with this video, give me a like, give me a subscribe. And if not, no worries. We can be friends in some other aspect of life. So anyway, what I want to talk about today is kind of a subject that's really close to my heart. It's actually kind of a somber day for me. May 23rd was my mom's birthday. Today would have been her 68th birthday. If you've watched some of my earlier videos, you probably know that my mom passed in 2021 of liver and pancreatic cancer. And, it was a horrible thing that happened, but I learned so much in that time, and I learned a lot from watching her go through that. And so the topic for today's video is on pain and suffering. And we usually hear those words kind of put together, pain and suffering. We don't usually hear them. I mean, you do, but for some reason they just kind of seem to come as a package. And what I've learned, and what, especially in Eastern thought and Buddhism in particular, is that they're not the same thing. Pain is inevitable. I mean, things in life are going to hurt. Physically, they're going to hurt emotionally, they're going to hurt mentally. And that's just a truth that really can't be avoided unless you, pad yourself in bubble wrap and stay in your house and never go anywhere. And even then, something could happen and stuff. And so pain is one of the inevitable things in life. But suffering is a result of pain. Suffering describes our reaction to and then attachment to the pain that we suffer, or that we experience. And so in Buddhism, they use the analogy of two arrows. The first arrow is pain. They get you with that one. Then the second arrow is suffering that comes as a result of the first arrow. And the thing about it is that, if you learn how to live skillfully, you can dodge that second arrow for the most part. I'm not sure that anybody can ever be completely free of suffering. I think it's one of those things that requires a lot of presence, a lot of gratitude, and a lot of acceptance to alchemize and to kind of overcome. And I'm not sure that there's anybody that's, so in tune that they don't suffer at all. But what I've learned is that pain can be mitigated, and suffering can certainly be minimized for sure. And so, it's one of those things that, suffering is sort of an attachment to the pain that we feel. When I was drinking and drugging, boy, did I attach to every piece of pain I ever had. I was a victim of this and victim of that, and and I lived in that mindset because to me, well, looking back, it was a justification for using drugs and alcohol. If you felt what I felt, and you suffered like I suffered, then you'd probably want to drink and drug too. And it's over something that happened years ago or something like that. And I'm still just keeping it fresh in my mind, in order to keep up that, that delusion within myself that I somehow deserve to be able to, use and drink because, I'm just carrying around all this suffering. When, come to find out, I probably could have put that down years ago and, relieved myself of a lot of that suffering. But unfortunately, it's took a lot of suffering to kind of come to that realization that, suffering is absolutely optional for the most part. And so, what I learned from my mom was the difference between pain and suffering. My mom, when she was diagnosed, had stage 4 advanced liver cancer. And she had probably gotten it from working in a building she was a police officer in the police department that she worked in for the first 10 or 12 years of her career. What had been an old military building that was full of asbestos and chemicals and God knows what and stuff. And several of her coworkers from that time also died of liver cancer. So we're pretty sure there was some kind of connection to that building. And so, it wasn't really something that she brought on herself. It wasn't from drinking. It wasn't from anything like that. It was just circumstantial. And so, when my mom got diagnosed, it was stage 4 advanced. It was a terminal diagnosis. And that hurt her very much, and physically, the pancreatic cancer in particular is incredibly painful. And so, the pain of the diagnosis and the physical pain hit her, but she never took on an attachment to the cancer diagnosis. She never took on the identity of a cancer patient. And, she wasn't delusional. She went to chemo. She did everything she could to take care of herself. And that was probably a good thing because, with her diagnosis, the, 1 year survival rate's pretty low. It's like, I think it's like 5%, to survive 1 year. And she managed to live for another 18 months after a diagnosis. And it was because she did the things that she needed to do to take care of herself. She went to chemo. She, made all of her doctor's appointments and stuff. So she did not ignore the fact that she had cancer. It was an objective truth. She had stage 4 cancer, and it was objectively true that it was, she was going to die from it, and it was a terminal diagnosis. And I'm sure that was hard. It really was. But like I said, she never sort of internalized that diagnosis and never kind of put herself in the suffering mode of a victim of cancer. It was just like, okay, so what do we do today? Let's just keep working on this. And, and so she was able to prolong her life probably longer than she would have if she would have either gone into despair or gone into denial, like, oh no, I don't have cancer or something like that. So, she managed to find kind of a middle path through that. And it was really inspiring me to see. I think had I had that diagnosis, I don't know if I would have handled it as well as she did, but, it really taught me a lot about the difference of pain and suffering, and that suffering, for a large part, is sort of a conscious choice in a way. Like I said, it's an identification with that pain and actually taking it on as part of your identity. And, the truth of the matter is that at some point, when you go through something painful, like when my mom died, it was incredibly painful for me. And, it wasn't a one and done kind of thing. The pain lasted for months. It was horrible. It was really hard. It was very painful. But at some point, it occurred to me that, okay, like, this isn't as painful anymore, and it's okay for me to let that go. I think especially when a loved one dies, we have this sort of conditioned thing that, if we let go of the grief, somehow we're doing them a disservice. And that's absolutely not true. The lesson is that eventually you can let go of the grief and stuff. And so my mom's been gone for 4 years now, and I'm okay with it. I miss her, obviously. I miss her dearly. And especially on today, it was her birthday, and we always got together for her birthday. And for some reason, somehow or another, every birthday she ever had, some sort of disaster happened. It was just crazy. It's like a yearly ritual. Like, what's the mom birthday disaster this year? I remember one year we went down there. It was the first time my wife had gone for my mom's birthday, and my wife was riding my daughter's Razor scooter and fell off of it and broke her tailbone. Ended up in the hospital on my mom's birthday. And it was just always something like that. And so, I obviously really missed that, and it was so painful to go through. But then when the pain was over, it was over. Like, I was able to, and I had a lot of help. I had a therapist. I've always had like AA sponsors and stuff like that around to help me kind of to work through these things. But at some point, I became okay with letting go of the suffering. And, I will never forget my mom, like, I think about her every day and stuff, but I don't have to suffer over her. And what she realized in her cancer diagnosis is that, yeah, it was going to be painful, but she didn't have to identify with it, and let that become her, you know what I mean? So in a way, cancer killed my mom, but it never beat her. Up until the day that she died, she was always in good spirits, and, we got to be there when she passed, and it was very peaceful and everything. And, there was no feeling of, oh God, why did this happen? Blah, 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 and stuff like that. Like, it was just, like, okay, this is done, and this is what's happened. And now let's go deal with the pain and eventually move on. And that's kind of how it worked out. And it's just weird because we're so conditioned by society to suffer for things, really, like, if I listen to what society tells me, when your parent dies, like, you should, like, it's okay if you're still suffering for years afterward and stuff. And yeah, I suppose it is, but, but for my own sanity in my own life, I had to at some point put it down, and just be okay with remembering my mom, be okay with the fact that she is gone, come into acceptance about that. And then just kind of, look back on the great memories and all the awesome times we had and stuff. And so, yeah, today, mom's 68th birthday, it's kind of bittersweet. Obviously I miss her and stuff, and I'm just so grateful for the time that I had with her and the lessons we learned and all the laughs we shared and stuff. She was a really amazing lady. So So, Mom, this one's for you. Happy birthday. We miss you terribly, but hope everything's well. And, I know we'll be back together someday. So, anyway, that's all I had for today. It's the beginning of Memorial Day weekend. Please, please, for the love of God, everybody be safe out there. A lot of drinking and crazy stuff that happens over this particular weekend in the States. So, just be smart. I'm probably going to be staying in all weekend and stuff. I'm just going to avoid the rush because, I was one of those people at one time that was the crazy people that were out in Memorial Day. So I know what's out there. So anyway, and I just wish you guys a happy and safe long weekend, and we will see you next time. Thanks.